Hey everybody, this is James P. Wagner here with Local Gems Press. I'm here with Nick Hale. Hey Nick,
Hey James, how's it going?
not bad. We're here for another episode of the Publisher Speakeasy, which is a little thing that we do based on a lot of questions that we get. Obviously, we go on book tour a lot. We do a lot of seminars, webinars, courses, etc., and we're always getting the same questions over and over. So one day we decided let's do a video series in which we can point people to them, so we don't have to say the same thing over and over. But
Yeah, we probably still will.
yeah, spoiler alert, we do anyway. But that's okay. But yeah, these are just questions that come to us from all these different sources. And so, one topic that a lot of people are always asking about, pretty much any format, is the role of social media when it comes to the poet, the author, and all that. And, because we've seen so many different examples of like, social media. Being used to kind of explode certain careers, like out of nowhere, like that Milk and Honey girl, who was on Instagram or doing that. And, a lot of people have seen a lot of mainstream authors whose names they've known now, on social media, developing huge followings, and some of them even ditching their traditional publishers for self-publishing because they can connect directly with their, audiences that are in the tens of millions and things like that. And so a lot of, smaller time authors, first time authors, and even intermediate and some advanced authors are wondering like kind of how to tap into, I guess, that gold rush of social media, or if it even really is a gold rush. Which I'd say it kind of is and it isn't, at the same time. But Nick, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, man, where to start? So many points about social media. I think I'll start with talking about people who one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make on social media is overusing social media. And there are two ways they do that. One is by only using social media and absolutely nothing else as to communicate with people. That's a huge mistake because let's take for example Facebook. You're on Facebook and that's all you use. Your Facebook page is how you communicate with your audience, with your publishers. That's how you schedule your events. Everything is up on Facebook. Well, let's say Facebook suspends your account. That's gone. Your
Hmm.
following's gone, and it's going to be very difficult to get that back. And that's, maybe your account gets hacked. Maybe Facebook goes down for a day. Um, Besides the fact that there are plenty of people who never look at Facebook, there are plenty of people, believe it or not, who are still not on Facebook. So Facebook doesn't own the world. Just like anything else, you want to diversify.
Yeah.
So having only one social media platform or only using social media as an outlet, and we'll talk about some of the other options later, I'm sure, uh, is
Yeah.
is a huge mistake. And the other mistake is the opposite of that, spreading yourself thin, going on every social media platform and having a presence there. There's a reason why big companies pay social media managers to manage each of their social media accounts. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a
Full-time
lot of work to do.
jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to do too. So you as an individual who's probably working another job, and also if you're an author, I would expect you're doing some writing at some point. Getting on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, all of them. I'm blanking on other ones, but use your imagination.
Mhm.
Like that's way too much. Even keeping up with two is difficult. To the extent that you would need to have a reasonable following. So, pick one or two that you like, that you use consistently, that your core audience is already on, and stick with those. But like I said, use other options as well.
Yeah, and what you said about how like yeah, you have all your stuff on a social media account and something could happen to it. Well, we've both seen examples of that actually happen to poets and authors that we know. One person who shall remain nameless, a big example of somebody who's a bit of a local legend up here on Long Island. Um, I mean, he had a small email list because he's publishing a magazine, but he also, he was using social media. He had like a page that had like 6,000 something people following it, and he really used Facebook to do all the event invites and to talk to all the people and give them all the stuff. And something just randomly happened to his account that he still doesn't have any idea what actually happened, and he had to start a new one. And had to actually, I mean, I was, helping and like, just letting people know, like, okay, it's this person. Don't worry, that it's not a hacker at this point, because obviously people get second friend requests from somebody who they think is, already on their friends list. They question that, but it took them months to, well, probably at least a month to even get to the point they had like, 20% of what they used to have back. on that, and I don't think they even ever fully got back to where they were on Facebook for that, because they've been building it since like 2008 or 9, and that was largely what they put in. And the person even told me is like, yeah, I kind of didn't realize how much I just totally relied on that in order to do that. So one thing that we tell everybody else is that if you're going to use social media, definitely have it rerouted somewhere else so you can maintain your contact with your fans. Um, look at social media as it's a great way to interact with your fans, but it shouldn't be the only way to interact with your fans. And it shouldn't be, something you completely rely on, because there was somebody else. There was a big poetry group up in Connecticut that, they had a big page there, and something happened to that owner's account. And then, the page disappeared because, when their account disappeared, they were the only admin. And so they lost like all these posts, all these pictures, all these poems, all these things were just completely poofed, because that was where they used it as a base. So and you hear horror stories like that, not just in the writing world, but in a lot of different places where people just lose followings for a lot of things. So
Yeah, and especially in today's world, I'd say the past 4 or 5 years, it's gotten worse with social media companies closing accounts or shutting down accounts around, or even just restricting accounts. If you get, not, I don't know if Facebook does this, but I know other sites, the site formerly known as Twitter, for example, will shadow ban accounts where you have no notice that you're being banned, and you're not actually banned, but your posts are not getting the visibility that they normally would. So all of those things could happen to your account, and often it could be because some moderator at that site didn't like the content that you're putting out, or I mean, you a lot of people think of social media as like a public utility, or as like a public forum or a platform, that their free speech is, it's a privately owned site.
yeah,
So it's important to keep in mind those websites are owned by companies with corporate opinions and moderators and human employees controlling the robots that moderate the posts. So a lot of the stuff that goes on there is subjective,
well,
and
that's
it's
also
not.
if you're lucky enough to even get to a human, because there's a lot of cases where accounts get flagged for being banned or restricted, and then you try to appeal it, and you never get to contact a human. It goes to this robot, to this chatbot, to this chatbot, to that chatbot, and it's
Yeah,
like, so in some cases you don't even have any human oversight, and the robot just made a screw up.
and it gets even worse if you're advertising on those platforms, because then you really have to be careful, because it's even more likely, if social media advertising is your only form of advertising, then you need to be careful, because Facebook especially can be very sensitive to things like transactions from different locations or other weird quirks that can cause them to close your account. And once your account gets closed or locked, it's very hard to get back.
Yes,
Um,
but you just brought up another point there, which is advertising on there, because a lot of people, I think, because they've looked at so many things from in front of the camera, they don't look behind the camera so often. So a lot of people see viral posts, and they automatically assume that, like, oh, that happened organically. Um, Sometimes it does, but more often than that, you have people who are using social media where they're paying for ads, or they're boosting posts to go farther, and then so it's sort of like an artificial organic growing, because it gets in front of more people, but then it has more of the options to be shared more, people to click on your links more. Some people like, hey, I like this, and then tag it or something like that.
right.
So that's one of the benefits of doing that versus, like, say, Google AdWords or other advertisements like that, where you don't. It's a little bit harder to share it. With social media, you can share it. The ads can get shared a little easier.
That's true. And Facebook ads, especially because Facebook ads look like regular posts.
Hmm.
So it's very easy for people to do that. They will share, they'll comment, and all that. And there's also soft advertising. Getting into that, sites like You Like Hits, or I know there are other ones out there, and maybe you remember some of the names, James, but like where you can go, you sign up for this, and you can either pay money to get points, or you can do tasks to get points. And those tasks would be view this video, comment on this video, like this post, and then you can spend points to get other people to do that on your posts and your videos.
Yeah,
James
but
and I
but
have.
but a warning for that though is you're gonna get if you want to have a video that looks like it has a lot of hits and has a lot of hits, that's great, but it's not gonna go to the audience you're hoping for. Whereas if you do if you do like legitimate, like, Facebook ads, for example, or Twitter ads or things like that, you can And say that you have say you're trying to get a poem about autism or a poem about breast cancer or something like that, seen by people who actually give a crap about what it is you're doing. Then you have the benefit of, you can put in there in the ad, like, people interested in this topic, or interested in poetry itself, interested in this topic. You could even do it by like location and age group, and then you can kind of, for a few cents a click, you can put it in front of like people, you're specifically targeted to what it is you're interested. That's one of the benefits of it, is you could do it that way. And
Yeah,
then go to people who actually maybe want to see what you do. Whereas something like you like hits, it's like you'll get hits, but nobody on there is going to give a crap about it.
right.
Put up there.
It's the goal for your post, right? Like if you, pun intended, but if
Yeah.
if you're actually trying to sell a thing, an ad is better. But if you're just trying to expand your reach, something like you like hits can be nice because you get a lot of views, which feeds the algorithm and tells it, this is a post that people care about, so that it boosts your other posts without having to pay, you know, Facebook or Twitter, whoever, to boost your post. Um, the one thing I would be careful of is comments on those things. We've seen some examples of videos where it's a video meant to entertain. It's like a poetry video or a song, and people's comments are things like "good informations." I learned lots from video, and the comments are usually unmoderated, so you'll get a lot of really strange and disjointed things, or things that are
Yeah.
complete non sequiturs to the video.
Yeah, that make
So
no sense to what it
yeah,
is that you're doing there.
and it's pretty obvious then that you are on one of those sites just paying for hits and comments.
Yeah, definitely. Um, but yeah, I guess we've talked a little bit about a lot of the negatives about social media so far. So probably should spin back to the positives, because yes, there are
They
positives.
have those?
I know, right? But one of the positives is that, like if you happen to have an author website, for example, which we do recommend that authors have some kind of a presence like independently, and we will have a separate video on that topic at some point. Um, but social media is a great way to kind of it's an outpost in a way. It's like the town commons where everybody kind of is, so you can put stuff out there, and it'll kind of lead people back to what it is that you're doing. And it is very viral, it is very easy to share things, pardon me. And so it's a great way that when you put things out there, you can match it with, again, things that are people who are interested in what it is that you're actually doing. um, and really there isn't anything else that actually does it as quickly or kind of as completely as social media does. And then you know and we have seen very examples, again, like with the book Milk and Honey. That person had an Instagram following that was in, because she kind of combined her poems with pictures and stuff, and so they made great Instagram posts. And you had hundreds of thousands of people looking at that stuff. So then when she came out with the book, it was like, well, there was an audience that was already built there, and they were waiting to buy the book. um Once upon a time, it's like you had a lot of authors and stuff giving lectures and talks and things like that. And so you would put out a book, because the book would travel farther than like the person would. And you'd build a following with the book. Nowadays, it's kind of more like you have to kind of build the following before you do the book. I mean, really, you could do the book, you can wake up one day and be like, yeah, I want to do a book, and just, do whatever. But it's probably going to sit there if you don't have the following. Whereas these days, you build the following first, and then the book sells after the following, you know.
Yeah. And to sort of add to that, it's also a really good way to impulsively put out content. Oh, hey, I'm going live. You don't need to schedule anything. You don't need to edit anything. You can just sort of put out unfiltered content whenever you feel like it. Um, this is great if you're in some kind of information niche, if you're doing nonfiction or something like that, or even if you have an audience who has a really close connection with you and cares about the behind the scenes, or if you want to talk about the thought process behind, a scene that happened in your last book, and why you wrote it that way, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I've known authors who use their social media. So one example of an author was talking about how he puts just pictures of whatever he's cooking and his recipes that he's cooked for the day on his Facebook, and for some reason his audience is really into that. Um, it can be a great way to connect with your audience on a level that you don't get to do otherwise, where they're getting to know not just like the author you, but maybe a little bit more about your personal life. And that's up to how much you want to share. Some people are very closed about the rest of their personal life. Some people pick one or two things that they enjoy doing that they'll also write about on their social medias in addition to writing. So some people are very open. You know everything about them and what their kids had for breakfast yesterday, and then what they're planning to name the new cat and all that stuff.
Yes, some people you know a little too much about thanks to the social media. Um, but then again, I did just share a picture of a chess tournament I was in a few days ago, so I shouldn't complain. But yeah, I mean, and well, with the cooking guy though, they got the benefit of it looks good, and so if you're hungry, you're like,
That's true.
so that's
Yeah,
something like that.
and everybody loves to eat. Everybody can connect with that. Well, I mean, maybe some people don't love to eat. I know a few, but most people love, at least need to eat.
Yeah. Um, but I mean, yeah, and it also depends on like what it is you're writing or what it is you're doing as well, because different social media platforms would probably be tailored better to others. For example, Twitter or X or whatever it is now or whatever it's going to be. I saw there were a lot of channels on there that basically were people just posting haiku-sized poems on that because you had the 140 characters or whatever, and so it was like really short posts. So it lent itself well to that. Instagram lent itself well to, pictures with short poems and things like that. Facebook is a little bit better for longer posts or at least pieces of longer posts and things like that. And also for, actually maintaining big photo databases. And then that
Events
becomes,
also.
well, yes, for ads
Yeah.
also. But that's also then becomes like, the question that we're talking about earlier, which, or like what you said about people kind of getting social media overwhelm. And then like, because there's a lot of them out there, and every couple of years there's new ones that are trending. And then people are like, oh, do I need to get on this one? Do I need to get on that one? Do I stay on this one? Oh, Elon Musk just bought Twitter. Do I jump off that one? All those things.
Yeah.
And so it's like people can, again, like you said, companies hire, people full time to manage these because there's so many of them in it. And in order to get traction on them, you have to post, at least semi regularly. I mean, luckily enough, a lot of them have things where you can set up posts and be scheduled in advance, so you don't necessarily have to be there. And once upon a time, you had Tumblr where you used to hook up like all your social medias and you do it on one and it would go to the others. Unfortunately, Tumblr became something entirely different than that. But at least the base of tumbling over was a good idea.
Tumblr still exists. It's just they kind of shot themselves in the foot a few years ago.
Yeah.
Uh, so a lot of it depends on what you want to do, right? And what you do and what you put out and what your following is. If you host a lot of events, Facebook is a good choice because it has an easy way to schedule and advertise those events. Now that's not the only one out there. I mean, you could even use something like Meetup, which kind of counts as a social media. If you do a lot of pictures, Instagram or Twitter or Pinterest, depending on where your core audience is. Again, like if your core audience is you know the demographic that's more on Pinterest, go there. If your core audience is really young people, or it's young people, you go to Instagram. If your core audience is really young people, you probably want, I don't know, Snapchat or the TikToks or something. I feel really old now.
Keep
But
talking for a minute.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna find.
but okay. But also there's YouTube. A lot of people don't even think of YouTube as social media anymore. But if you do videos, you've got TikTok, you've got YouTube, you've got all those options. And then of course, backing it up because I'm talking out of order. When James was talking about having a following and building the following before you build the product or you write the book, in this case it was a product. A good example of that would be Mr. Beast. The guy has a gigantic YouTube following and one day just decided to open up a burger company. Now I know I've seen some recent articles that didn't go too well for him in the end, but that wasn't because of his plan. It was because of his partner.
His coffee company seems to be doing very well.
Yeah, I have yet to try that. And I had a good experience. I enjoyed the burger. I do agree with you, James. It was a little bit expensive, but I've heard that it just varies based on where you lived. But that's a great example of like I've got this massive following now. What do I do with it? And a lot of the times that's actually the more effective way to go about doing things. I remember that there was one course that I took very very long time ago, feels like, and one of the things they said was you don't start monetizing until you've built your audience up to a certain point, because if you start monetizing before that, it doesn't look genuine, and your audience will resist it. But if you have an audience and you have a relationship with your audience, and this is where social media is really useful in building the relationship, just like, for example, Mr. Beast with his viewers, one by the time you're ready to monetize it, they'd be falling over themselves basically to participate in whatever it is you're doing to monetize. Click your ads or buy your products or whatever it is. I mean, it does help that in that case that he had really good food photography, and every time I saw pictures of those burgers, I just needed to try one. But
And it's funny because
yeah,
the point you're just making there, speaking of social media, ironically, was one of Facebook's big things early on between Mark Zuckerberg and Eduardo Saverin arguing about when they should advertise it. And Zuckerberg was like, "Well, not yet. It's not. We don't know what it is yet." And turned out to be correct because then later on, how much money it makes in ads now.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, in terms of like bringing that back a little bit to like examples of writing that I've seen where that's actually worked is, I've seen people who've they've maintained like little websites, like even just like a blogger website, and but either every day or every couple of days they were posting on either Facebook or Twitter a little bit of their writing, and over time, like several years, built up a decent following of people reading it because of that. And so when it came time that they had a book, and they pressed the button saying, and I'm talking like they had like a ghetto setup for the book, like it was like for sale on eBay, as copies or whatever, rather than like any kind of even big setup or whatever. But they sold hundreds of copies doing it this way just because people had been kind of waiting for that, when are you going to have the thing that we want to buy, because they've been doing it for that long.
yeah. You get to the point if you're putting out information products or if you're putting out stories or whatever it is, where if especially if you're putting out all of your content for free, you get to the point where people say, "This is great. Where can I buy your thing? I want to pay you for something."
Mhm.
And the more stuff you give them for free, generally, the more people will feel like they want to compensate you for everything that you've done for them. And I know this is a little bit off topic of authors because most authors, I think, are expecting to sell books.
Mhm.
But if you're starting off as a blogger or putting up serialized posts or stories or things for free, it can be a really good way to get people really excited for your full length things once you're ready to finally have something to sell. It's also a great way, I mean, just to make people happy because people love free stuff.
Yeah, well, it's also a way to kind of get people to have a relationship with what it is that you're doing, because that's really the only thing that sells pretty much anything. And really the only thing that ever has sold pretty much anything is either, like a hard commodity you have a genuine need for, like, I need this tractor. So you go up and you find the first one you can find, or, oh, I know this company or this writer and I want to read their stuff, or that's really what it is. Um,
Yeah.
Another way that one could use, social media or whatever, like the thing that I actually got up to go get was a copy of, because I'm in my bookstore right now, was a copy of a little book that I did with, um, pardon me, getting over a cold, if you can't tell. I did this with 19 other authors. This was, the idea for this started during COVID. There was another book. I don't have that copy with me right now, but where basically was bored and I had a whole lot of half written poems. So I started, putting up the first verse of a poem or whatever and told people like, hey, write the next verse in this and then, come back and I'd rewrite another verse and then they'd finish it. So we'd have like 4 verse poems or whatever. So you could see, some of these in there, like the 4 verses. So I got to the habit of I would post like the first verse of a poem on my Facebook and then just ask a bunch of my poet friends, like, hey, like write the next verse. And so I'd get a whole bunch of them, they'd write it, I'd be writing it. We'd have all these threads on there of just complete poems happening that way. And then I'm like, well, now there's enough of this. Let me put it together into a book, and the book kind of had a lot of built-in advertisement because all these people were being a part of it. I ended up calling them, mosaic poems because it was a bunch of different collaborative people and things like that. Um, but that was just another way to use social media, just not necessarily to advertise things that I was already creative with, but also to kind of, help me be more creative in that way too.
Oh boy, because you just kind of opened up a whole new topic that we haven't even touched on yet.
Mhm.
And because we talk about social media to connect with the audience and to advertise, but also social media to find ideas. I was watching a video the other day. It was a critique of something, and um, she was talking about a particular metaphor that was used that was absolutely terrible in the context of the writing. And she said, "How hard would it have been to just go on Twitter or Facebook or whatever the social media and just say, hey guys, I need a metaphor for this thing. It has to fit this criteria. Give me some suggestions and use one of those." Um, Now, in that case, it." that's nice and broad, so it's not something, so you don't want to go and ask people to do your writing for you, but if you have a part of an idea and you're just looking for that little piece of inspiration to get you over the edge, um, sometimes using social media and just crowdsourcing can help, because sort of like those poems in that book, James, where you're basically writing off of each other, and the previous writer's piece becomes the prompt for what you write. Sometimes somebody will say something that just shakes something loose, and then everything else will follow.
Yeah, I know that happens quite a lot. I mean, it's sort of like the benefit in a way of group think or group thought or crowd think and all that. It's there's plenty of negatives of those things too, but one of the positive is the creativity that can come out of that.
Yeah. Also, if there's something that you don't know about, that you know your friends or your audience or somebody from your audience might know about, and you want to, have a well researched piece, that's another good way of just say, hey, I'm writing a book about 18th century priests. Does anybody know the name of the person who was at this church at that time?
Mhm.
I want it to be as realistic as possible.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of uses for it that way. One thing that people kind of ask then is, like if, it is possible to get overwhelmed with as many of them as there are, like, what do you do about that? And one thing that, we say this in our seminars or whatever, so you guys are getting a little bit of a paid training here just for being here by saying this, but we say it's a good idea to go with a major and a minor when it comes to social media. And while which one you pick does matter somewhat in the long term, if you have one, it's better to go heavy into one that you've already going into than to try to go across so many and split your focus so much. I mean, you know, like for one thing, it's like when you think about focus, you got to look at it like a pizza. The more slices, the less everybody's getting. So it's like if you've got like, okay, here's this one person's getting 6 slices, this one's getting 2. So if you figure that like a major and a minor, at least both people are eating. One's eating way better than the other, but at least whatever. But you start splitting that up into like 16ths, 32s, and all that stuff, and then all these people just getting one bit. It's like nobody's really satisfied at the end of that meal. So, and that's kind of what it be like with social media or managing a lot of different creative sites, because you have split focus and you're not putting as much as you can anywhere. So, like say that you have Facebook and Twitter, then you want to make one of them the one that you post on the most often, and the other one to be one that you do at least a couple times a week in order to make, because the thing is any of these consistency is what really helps with the algorithm. And also if you've got a following, it's like you want to engage them at least so often. Like you don't want to do it so often that they just kind of start blanking out what it is you're doing, which is the other problem, is people doing it too much. But you do need to do it at least a consistent enough rate, and that might vary based on what your audience is also, so kind of be aware of that. But yeah, having a major and a minor is definitely what you want to do, at least some ones that you're focused on somewhat seriously. In terms of which ones are the best ones, people will debate on that, and people will still debate on that. I say, for all its problems, I still say Facebook is one of the best ones to be on, because hey, it's been there as long as it has, and it seems like it's not going anywhere anytime soon. But also, it's got a lot of people on there because the picture hoarding that's on Facebook and it keeps people there because like all your social pictures from all those years built up. People keep going back to that, so that one's a good one. Um,
Facebook is kind of the catch-all too, because it can do video, it can do pictures, it can do text posts, it can do long text posts, it can do events. It doesn't particularly excel in any of them. Any one of those, you can probably find one that does it better, but it does all of them.
yeah. And another one though, it would depend on what it is that it is you're doing, because again, like for the author of Milk and Honey, Instagram was perfect for her because of the way that she was putting her stuff out there. For somebody else might be a different thing. If somebody, for example, if instead of putting out pictures with words, you're wanting to do like voice clips of you reciting your poems, that might inform which one you actually want to go with. You might want to pick one that kind of specializes in that more. So again, that varies, and people will debate as the day is long which social media is better than the other one to post on, and that will also change year by year because of what's available. But the fundamental principle of having a major and a minor being the ones that you should do if you're going to go down the funnel of using social media, that's really what you should do. You shouldn't, if you start doing too much more than that, unless you're fortunate enough to be able to hire a virtual assistant or have a team of 7 people, more than that, you're going to start spreading yourself way too thin.
Yeah, and I mean there are sites that will auto post. I don't like those particularly, and I don't know if they've gotten better because I haven't seen any that people have used or evidence of people using them in a long time. But I used to have some Facebook friends who had things that would post. So take anything they posted on Twitter or Instagram and post it to Facebook as well.
Mhm.
And it's formatted for Twitter or Instagram hashtags and all. And hashtags are just annoying on Facebook. They don't do anything unless things have changed since the last time I really used Facebook regularly. But
Yeah, like
um,
there are people out there
you
who
know,
are more up on the tactics than we are when it comes to it, because this is one of those cases where strategy and tactics will be very different. The strategy of having a major and a minor is something that I don't think that strategy is going to change for at least the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, as long as social media is still around, of having like, one you really focus on and one you semi-focus on. I think that that's a good strategy, but the tactics of how to do it, which ones will roll over and all that stuff, that's going to change or whatever. And so there's other people out there who might know that better than us, but the strategy
yeah.
will be
But I mean, my
consistent.
point though with that particular thing where it was an automated post that annoyed the heck out of me. And I know I'm not the only one. I'm sure there are people who just don't care. They're like, oh, hashtag is part of the culture now. It's fine. But it just struck me as really lazy and disingenuous, and uh, it it turned me off to their posts, and I ended up not muting them or whatever it was, so they stopped showing up on my feed because it was just annoying me. And
Yeah.
I'm sure some people won't get as annoyed at that as I will, but sometimes those tools, useful as they seem, can backfire.
Well, no, like it's the same
You
like type
know?
of annoying to me, like how suddenly everything now is designed for mobile.
Yeah,
Where it's like when I'm on a desktop, it's like I want a more comprehensive view. I don't want to look like I'm looking at a phone screen when I'm on my desktop, like so.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
to
so I
me
get that.
too, it struck me as like I don't care about my Facebook following. I'm just basically rehashing the same exact thing I put on. And I know that that's the whole point, right? It's supposed to be if you want to send a blast, you send it over multiple platforms in the easiest way possible. But it it just seemed like yeah, I'm not even going to pay attention to the medium I'm using, and it kind of goes into something I would recommend being careful of, and that is don't try to shoehorn yourself into whatever the hottest one is. Don't like okay, I'm going to research social media numbers, and these two sites have the top number of users, regardless of whether it's the best way for me to show my content.
Mm,
Because you're going to look like that. You're going to have a bunch of hashtags on Facebook, or you're going to have no pictures on Instagram,
yeah,
or some just if it doesn't work for you, don't use it, no matter how popular it is. Use the thing that works, plays to your content strengths and plays to your own strengths the most. And the one last thing I'd say about choosing your social media is what do you want already? Like
yeah,
most of us, depending on what point in your life you are, but most of us have interacted with and are at least signed up for at least one social media. And now you may have like 15 friends, and that's fine. But that might be another thing to consider when starting. If you already have, you know, 10,000 followers on something, then that might be worth staying on and leveraging that following, even if they're not following you because you're an author. They're following you because you were the party dude at college. Um, so those are all things to consider. You don't want to just abandon the advantages you already have for what's popular.
yeah. Well, I mean, being the party dude at college sells books too, so.
That's true.
But yeah, so that does bring up a good point. I think we touched on a little bit, but just to reiterate, yeah, there is sort of a tendency to jump on the latest trend, and it's good to understand the trends, but kind of only ride them if it makes sense, because we have seen that there's no shortage of pretenders who kind of just jump on everything that's new because, oh, it's new and exciting. And no, I have 87,000 NFTs of like, my poetry that, nobody's going to buy, and stuff like that. Like
Hmm.
we've
And
seen some very funny stuff out there. So,
believe me, it'll lose you as many followers as it gains you, too. Maybe more because for a lot of people, they're sick of hearing it.
mhm.
Um, and it's annoying, and it depends on what the trend is too. But if like I've known artists who just did fan art of whatever the popular thing was, Five Nights at Freddy's or Stranger Things or whatever the thing that everybody in their internet circle seemed to be talking about. But the problem is by the time that circle was talking about it, everybody else had already heard enough about it that they were just sick of hearing it. So a lot of the times when you jump on trends, it's almost impossible to get in early enough that it's not going to turn people off to it.
Yeah, definitely. So we've gone on, speaking of turning off, we've gone on this topic for quite a while at this point, so probably should leave it here. Maybe this will warrant a revision or a part two at another point.
Yeah, probably. I feel like we only scratched the surface with social media. This is a huge topic, but
Yeah,
yeah,
there
it'd be fun to revisit
be,
it.
could be hours and hours on this. And I don't think my voice can take any more of that right now. So, uh, yeah. So thank you everybody for listening to this. Hopefully we didn't go into too many circles. Thank you, Nick, for doing this with me. This is the publisher Speakeasy. Shh, don't tell anybody. There are 90 free poetry prompts in the description of this video, and also a link to information about publishing coaching. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.